I never thought my neighbor would steal from me, but watching Brenda Calloway tumble down her ice-covered front steps while clutching my stolen bag of ice melt was perhaps the most ironic thing I had witnessed in my 38 years of life. Let me back up a bit. My name is Vincent Crawford, and I live in the Pleasant Ridge Homeowners Association community in Columbus, Ohio. I moved here 3 years ago after my divorce, thinking a fresh start in a nice neighborhood would help me rebuild my life. The townhouse was perfect, the neighbors seemed friendly enough, and I figured joining an HOA community would mean someone else would handle the annoying maintenance stuff, while I focused on my career as a software engineer. What I did not anticipate was Brenda Calloway becoming HOA president 6 months after I moved in. Brenda was 52 years old, had perfectly highlighted blonde hair that she got touched up every 3 weeks like clockwork, and she drove a white Lexus SUV with a bumper sticker that read, "I speak to managers for a living." I should have known right then what I was getting into. The problem started small. Brenda would walk around the neighborhood with her clipboard, taking notes on every minor violation she could find. My grass was a 1/4 inch too tall one week. Another time, my car was parked 3 inches over my designated parking spot line. She once fined me $50 because my doormat was burgundy instead of an approved earth tone color. Yes, our HOA had approved doormat colors. I wish I was joking, but I dealt with it. I paid the fines, fixed the violations, and tried to stay under her radar. Most of my neighbors did the same. We had a little text group where we would warn each other when we saw Brenda on patrol with her clipboard. It was like living under a regime, but we managed. Then winter came, and Ohio winters are no joke. This particular January was brutal. We had gotten hit with ice storm after ice storm, and the temperatures had not gone above freezing for 2 solid weeks. The HOA was responsible for salting the main walkways and common areas, but homeowners were responsible for their own front steps and the small path from their front door to the main walkway. I had stocked up early. I bought 6 bags of premium ice melt from the hardware store in late November, right before the first freeze. I kept them in my small shed out back, along with my snow shovel and other winter supplies. I was prepared, or so I thought. The first ice storm hit on a Tuesday morning. I woke up to a crystalline world where everything was covered in a thick sheet of ice. I could hear tree branches cracking under the weight. My car looked like it had been dipped in glass. I called into work and said I would be working from home because there was no way I was driving in that mess. I bundled up and headed out to my shed to grab my ice melt and shovel. I needed to clear my steps and path before the mail carrier came, or before I needed to run to the store for groceries. When I opened the shed door, my stomach dropped. All 6 bags of ice melt were gone. My shovel was still there, my other tools were untouched, but every single bag of ice melt had vanished. I stood there in the freezing cold, my breath making clouds in the air, staring at the empty space where my winter supplies had been. The shed door had not been forced open. There were no signs of a break-in, but someone had definitely been in there, and they had taken only the ice melt. I trudged back inside, my steps already getting dangerously icy, and checked my security camera. I had installed a simple camera above my back door after Brenda had once claimed I had left my grill out past the designated storage date. I had used the footage to prove I had actually put it away on time, which saved me a $200 fine. I pulled up the footage from the night before and started scanning through it. Most of it was just darkness, with the occasional motion-triggered light from a passing cat or raccoon. Then, at 2:15 in the morning, a figure appeared on screen. It was Brenda Calloway, clear as day under my motion sensor light, wearing a puffy black coat and carrying a flashlight. I watched in disbelief as she walked straight to my shed, opened it without any hesitation, and began hauling out my bags of ice melt. She made 3 trips, carrying 2 bags at a time, loading them into a red wagon she had brought with her. The whole operation took less than 10 minutes, and then she disappeared back into the darkness, pulling the wagon behind her. I sat back in my chair, absolutely stunned. The HOA president had stolen from me. She had come onto my property in the middle of the night and stolen my winter supplies. I watched the footage 3 more times, making sure I was not misunderstanding what I was seeing. But no, it was definitely Brenda, and she was definitely stealing my ice melt. My first instinct was to call the police, but I hesitated. Would they even take this seriously? It was just ice melt after all. But it was my property, and it had cost me almost $120 for all 6 bags. Plus, stores were already sold out because of the ice storm. I had checked online while watching the footage. Every hardware store, grocery store, and big box store within 30 miles was completely out of stock. I decided to confront her first. Maybe there was some explanation. Maybe she thought the ice melt belonged to the HOA for some reason, although that made no sense since it was in my private shed on my property. But I wanted to give her a chance to explain before I escalated things. I carefully made my way down my icy steps, holding onto the railing for dear life, and walked the 3 houses down to Brenda's place. Her townhouse was the largest in our development, a corner unit with an extra bedroom and a slightly bigger yard. As I approached, I immediately noticed that her front steps and walkway were absolutely covered in ice. She had not put down any ice melt at all. I rang her doorbell and waited. After a minute, she opened the door, wearing a cream-colored sweater and perfectly applied makeup despite it being barely 9 in the morning. "Vincent," she said, her voice cool and professional. "What can I do for you?" "Hi, Brenda. I have kind of a weird situation. Someone broke into my shed last night and stole all my ice melt, all 6 bags. I have it on camera, and I was wondering if you might have seen anything suspicious last night or early this morning." I watched her face carefully. She did not even flinch. Her expression remained perfectly neutral, almost bored. "How unfortunate," she said. "But no, I did not see anything. I was asleep by 10 o'clock. You should probably file a police report." "The thing is," I continued, "my camera actually captured the person who took it. And Brenda, it looks exactly like you." Now her expression changed. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and her mouth formed a thin line. "Are you accusing me of something, Vincent?" "I am just saying what I saw on the footage. Someone who looks just like you came to my shed at 2:15 this morning and took all my ice melt. Is there any chance you needed to borrow some and maybe forgot to ask? Because if you just ask, I would have shared." She laughed, but it was not a friendly sound. "Vincent, I have plenty of ice melt. I certainly would not need to take yours. Perhaps your camera is not as clear as you think it is. I suggest you check with some of the younger residents. Maybe one of the college kids down on Maple Court." "There are no college kids on Maple Court, Brenda. Everyone here is over 30. "Well, I do not know what to tell you. I did not take your ice melt, and I find it quite offensive that you would come to my door making accusations. If you continue to harass me, I will have to issue an HOA violation for disturbing the peace of fellow residents." I could not believe what I was hearing. She was going to fine me for asking about my stolen property. "Brenda, I have clear video footage. I can show it to you right now on my phone." "I do not need to see anything. I know I did not take your ice melt, so whatever that video shows, it is not me. Now, I have a very busy day ahead of me. Please leave my property." She shut the door in my face, leaving me standing on her icy porch completely dumbfounded. I carefully made my way back down her treacherous steps and walked home, my mind racing. She was going to pretend it had not happened. She was the HOA president, and she thought she was untouchable. When I got home, I immediately emailed the video footage to myself, backed it up to 3 different cloud services, and saved it on 2 USB drives. Then, I called the non-emergency police line for Columbus. The dispatcher listened to my story and said an officer would come by later in the day to take a report. Officer Maria Hernandez showed up around 3 that afternoon. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. I showed her the video footage on my laptop and she watched it twice without saying anything. "That is definitely theft," she said finally. "The footage is very clear. You know this woman. She is my HOA president. She lives 3 houses down." Officer Hernandez raised her eyebrows. "Your HOA president stole your ice melt. Did you have any prior disputes with her?" "Just the usual HOA stuff. She gives me violations all the time for minor things. Too many throw pillows on my porch, wrong color doormat, that kind of thing, but nothing major." "And the ice melt, what is the total value?" "About $120. But the bigger issue is that everywhere is sold out. I cannot replace it and my steps are already dangerous." Officer Hernandez nodded and made notes. "I am going to go speak with her. Can you show me which house?" I walked outside with her and pointed to Brenda's townhouse. The officer headed down the street, and I watched from my doorway as she rang Brenda's bell. The conversation took about 10 minutes. I could not hear what was being said, but I could see Brenda's animated gestures and the way she kept shaking her head. Officer Hernandez came back to my place after she was done. She denies taking anything. She claims she has never been to your property and that she was asleep at the time in question. I explained that we have video evidence, but she maintains her innocence. "So what happens now?" "I am filing a report for theft. The video evidence is pretty compelling. The prosecutor's office will review it and decide whether to press charges. The value is relatively low, so it would be a misdemeanor, but it is still theft. You should also get a restraining order if you feel threatened." "I do not feel threatened. I just want my ice melt back or the money to replace it." "Unfortunately, since everywhere is sold out, getting the actual product back might be difficult even if she admits she has it. But you can pursue this through small claims court as well. I will have my report filed by tomorrow, and someone from the prosecutor's office will be in touch." After Officer Hernandez left, I sat down and tried to work, but I could not focus. I kept thinking about Brenda's complete denial of something that was captured on video. The audacity of it was mind-boggling. But what really bothered me was why she had done it in the first place. If she needed ice melt, she could afford to buy it. She drove a Lexus and lived in the biggest unit in the development. Why steal from me? That evening, I posted in our neighborhood text group, not mentioning Brenda by name but warning everyone to lock up their sheds because someone was stealing ice melt. Within minutes, my phone started blowing up with responses. My neighbor Jerry from 2 houses down wrote, "Mine got stolen too. I thought I just misplaced them, but I had 4 bags in my garage and now they are gone." Then Sandra from across the street, "I am missing 3 bags. I thought my ex-husband took them out of spite, but he swears he did not." At least 5 other people reported missing ice melt. A pattern was emerging, and I had a pretty good idea who was behind it. But why would Brenda steal from multiple people? The next morning, I got my answer. I was looking out my front window, drinking my coffee, when I saw a white pickup truck pull up to Brenda's house. 2 men got out and started unloading bags of something from her garage. I grabbed my phone and zoomed in with the camera. Ice melt. At least 20 bags of ice melt, maybe more. The truck had a sign on the side. Randy's Home Services. They loaded up the truck. Brenda handed something to one of the men, probably cash, and they drove off. I quickly snapped photos of the truck, the license plate, and Brenda waving goodbye. I posted in the neighborhood group. Did anyone else just see that truck at Brenda's house? Pretty sure she just sold them a bunch of ice melt. The responses came quickly. Jerry wrote, "Wait, is Brenda the one who stole our ice melt?" I replied. "Check your security cameras if you have them. I caught her on mine." Over the next hour, 3 other neighbors confirmed they had footage of Brenda stealing from their properties. All of them had taken place in the middle of the night over the past week. She had been systematically going through the neighborhood, stealing everyone's ice melt supplies, and then selling them at marked-up prices to a contractor who needed bulk supplies for commercial properties. It was not just petty theft. This was organized. She had stolen from at least 8 households that we knew of, probably more. If she had taken an average of 4 bags from each house at $20 per bag, that was around $640 worth of stolen property. And if she had sold it to that contractor at inflated prices during a shortage, she probably made close to $1,500. I called Officer Hernandez back and filled her in on everything we had discovered. She sounded much more interested this time. "Send me all the footage from your neighbors who have it. This is looking like a larger operation. I am going to escalate this to detectives." That afternoon, Detective Robert Williams came to my house. He was a tall man in his 40s with gray hair at his temples and a serious demeanor. I showed him everything: my footage, the photos of the truck, the text from neighbors, and the contact information for everyone who had reported stolen ice melt. "This is good work," he said. "You basically built the case for us. We will be investigating this further. Do not confront Mrs. Calloway again. Let us handle it. Am I going to get my ice melt back? That is hard to say since she already sold it, but you can pursue compensation through the courts once this is resolved criminally." Over the next few days, things got interesting. Brenda must have realized people were onto her because she suddenly became very scarce. She stopped doing her usual neighborhood patrols with her clipboard. She did not answer her door when neighbors knocked. She even stopped coming to the HOA board meetings, sending emails saying she was sick with the flu. But the weather had not let up. More ice storms came through, and the entire neighborhood was struggling. My front steps were treacherous. I had tried using sand, which helped a little, but it was not the same as proper ice melt. I saw 2 different mail carriers nearly wipe out on various porches. The UPS guy actually did fall, though thankfully he was not hurt. Then, exactly 1 week after I had first confronted her, I was working from home when I heard a scream followed by a loud thud. I ran to my front window and saw Brenda lying at the bottom of her front steps. She was writhing in pain, and next to her, split open and spilling all over the icy ground, was a bag of ice melt. My ice melt. I recognized the brand and the specific type I had bought. I grabbed my phone and called 911, then ran outside to help. Several other neighbors had heard the scream too and were converging on Brenda's house. Jerry got there first and knelt down next to her. "Do not move," he said. "Ambulance is coming." Brenda was crying, clutching her leg. "It hurts so bad, I think it is broken." I looked at the scene. She had clearly been trying to carry the bag of ice melt down her front steps, which were still completely covered in ice because she had not put any down on her own property. The irony was almost too much. She had stolen everyone's ice melt, sold most of it for profit, and had not even used any on her own steps. Now she had fallen because of that decision, while holding one of the stolen bags. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes. The paramedics carefully loaded Brenda onto a stretcher while she moaned in pain. As they were loading her into the ambulance, I picked up the split bag of ice melt. The label was still intact, and I could see the specific marking I had made with a permanent marker on all my bags, my initials VC in the bottom corner. This was definitely my property. I showed it to Officer Hernandez, who had arrived with the ambulance. This is one of my stolen bags. I marked all of them with my initials. She took photos and bagged it as evidence. Looks like she kept at least one for herself. Shame she did not use it in time. Detective Williams came by the next day with an update. Mrs. Calloway is being charged with multiple counts of theft. We have overwhelming evidence from the security footage. She broke her leg in 2 places and will be in a cast for at least 3 months. She is also being removed as HOA president pending the outcome of the criminal case. What about getting our stuff back? Most of it was sold, but we are tracking down the contractor who bought it. He claims he did not know it was stolen. He might have to return it or pay restitution. You and your neighbors will need to file claims through the court system. I recommend you all get together and consider a joint civil suit in addition to the criminal charges. That evening, I organized a meeting with all the affected neighbors at Jerry's house. 12 of us had confirmed stolen ice melt, and we decided to go in together on a civil suit against Brenda for the value of the stolen property, plus damages. Sandra, who was a paralegal, offered to help us file everything properly, but the legal stuff was just beginning. The HOA board called an emergency meeting to address the situation. Since Brenda was removed as president, the vice president, a man named Tom Henderson, took over temporarily. Tom was actually reasonable and apologetic about the whole thing. I had no idea Brenda was doing any of this, he said at the meeting. The board is taking this very seriously. We are going to be implementing new oversight measures and looking into all of our finances to make sure nothing else inappropriate has occurred. That got everyone's attention. You think she might have stolen from the HOA too? Jerry asked. We are investigating, Tom said carefully. Let us just say there are some transactions that are not adding up, and we have hired a forensic accountant to review the books. Over the next week, the plot thickened considerably. The forensic accountant discovered that Brenda had been embezzling from the HOA for over a year. Small amounts at first, $20 here, $50 there, but it had escalated. In total, she had stolen nearly $12,000 from the HOA funds. She had created fake vendor invoices for snow removal, landscaping, and maintenance work that had never actually been performed. She would then pay these fake invoices with HOA money and deposit the checks into her personal account. The ice melt scheme, it turned out, was just her latest attempt to make some extra cash. She had probably figured that ice melt was small time enough that no one would notice or pursue it. She had not counted on security cameras or neighbors who actually communicated with each other. Detective Williams filed additional charges for the embezzlement. What had started as misdemeanor theft had now escalated to felony embezzlement and fraud. Brenda was looking at serious prison time if convicted. Meanwhile, I was still stuck with icy steps. The contractor who had bought the stolen ice melt did return what he had not used yet, which was about 8 bags. Jerry, Sandra, and I split them among the households that needed it most. It was not enough to replace everything that had been stolen, but it helped. Brenda's preliminary hearing was scheduled for February 15th. I took the day off work to attend, along with most of my neighbors. The courtroom was not huge, but we filled up 2 entire rows. Brenda arrived in a wheelchair, her legs still in a cast, wearing a conservative blue dress and looking significantly less put together than usual. Her lawyer, a young man in an ill-fitting suit, looked overwhelmed. The prosecutor laid out the charges. 8 counts of theft for the ice melt stolen from individual properties, multiple counts of embezzlement and fraud for the HOA theft, and 1 count of criminal trespassing. The evidence was presented. Security footage from multiple homes, bank records showing the embezzled money, testimony from the contractor who had purchased the stolen ice melt, and the forensic accountant's report. Brenda's lawyer tried to argue that she had been under extreme financial stress and had made poor decisions. He painted a picture of a struggling middle-class woman who had gotten in over her head. The prosecutor countered with evidence of Brenda's spending habits, including luxury vacations, expensive salon visits, and a recent kitchen renovation that had cost $30,000. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Patricia Morrison, listened to everything without much expression. At the end of the hearing, she set bail at $50,000 and scheduled the trial for April. Brenda's husband, a quiet man named Doug who worked as an accountant, paid the bail. I had only met Doug once or twice, and he had always seemed almost apologetic about Brenda's behavior. I wondered if he had known what she was doing. As we left the courthouse, Jerry caught up with me. "Can you believe all this? I mean, I knew Brenda was difficult, but a criminal, power corrupts," I said. "She probably started small and kept pushing boundaries until she convinced herself it was okay. Well, she is going to pay for it now. Did you see her face when they showed those bank records? She looked like she wanted to disappear." The civil suit moved forward in parallel with the criminal case. Sandra helped us file everything, and we had a hearing scheduled for March. We were suing for the value of the stolen ice melt, plus compensation for the danger she had put us all in by leaving our steps icy and unsafe. One neighbor, an elderly woman named Dorothy, had actually fallen on her steps and bruised her hip badly. We included her medical expenses in the lawsuit. Brenda's financial situation was deteriorating rapidly. Her lawyer fees were piling up, and the HOA had filed their own lawsuit for the embezzled funds. She was forced to put her townhouse on the market to try to cover costs. I saw the "for sale" sign go up in late February, a sad metal placard marking the fall of Pleasant Ridge's former tyrant. The trial in April was surprisingly quick. With all the video evidence and bank records, Brenda's lawyer convinced her to take a plea deal. She pled guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. Judge Morrison sentenced her to 3 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 months. She also had to pay full restitution to everyone she had stolen from, including the HOA. The civil suit was resolved shortly after. Since Brenda had already been found guilty criminally, proving liability in civil court was straightforward. The judge awarded us compensatory damages for all the stolen property, plus an additional $10,000 in punitive damages split among all the plaintiffs. Dorothy received an extra $5,000 for her medical expenses. Brenda's townhouse sold in May for significantly less than she had hoped. The criminal conviction had to be disclosed to buyers, and it had killed any chance of getting a good price. The proceeds went to paying restitution and legal fees. Doug filed for divorce shortly after the sale closed. I ran into him at the grocery store once, and he looked like a broken man. "I did not know," he told me, unprompted. "I swear, Vincent, I had no idea what she was doing. She handled all our finances. I just went to work every day and came home. When the police showed up with those bank records, it was the first time I understood how bad things had gotten." I believed him. Doug had always seemed like a decent guy who had been overshadowed by his wife's domineering personality. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "Start over, I guess. I have my own apartment now, trying to rebuild my life. I am really sorry for what she did to you and everyone else." "You do not have anything to apologize for, Doug. This was not your doing." We parted ways in the parking lot, and I never saw him again. I heard through the neighborhood gossip that he moved to another part of Columbus and was doing okay. Life in Pleasant Ridge slowly returned to normal, or at least a new version of normal. Tom Henderson agreed to serve as HOA president until proper elections could be held. His first order of business was dramatically reducing the number of petty rules and violations. The doormat color restriction was eliminated. The parking space rules were relaxed. The grass height requirement was changed to something reasonable. "We are supposed to be a community, not a prison," Tom said at a neighborhood meeting. "Let us focus on the things that actually matter, like safety and maintaining property values, and stop worrying about whether someone's flower pot is the wrong shade of terracotta." Everyone applauded. It was like a weight had been lifted from the entire neighborhood. People started talking to each other more, helping each other out. Jerry organized a block party that summer, the first one in years. We grilled burgers, the kids played in the street, and for the first time since I had moved to Pleasant Ridge, it actually felt like a pleasant place to live. I got a letter from Brenda in July. It came from the Women's Correctional Facility in Marysville, about 40 minutes north of Columbus. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was handwritten on standard notebook paper. Her handwriting was neat and controlled, just like everything else about her had been. "Dear Vincent," it began, "I do not expect you to forgive me. I am writing this because my therapist here says I need to take accountability for my actions and try to make amends where possible. What I did was wrong. There is no excuse for stealing from you and the other neighbors, and there is certainly no excuse for embezzling from the HOA. I convinced myself that I deserved the money, that I was working so hard for the community and should be compensated. But that was just a lie I told myself to justify stealing. The truth is I was greedy and I liked the power of being in charge. I liked controlling everything and everyone, and when people started resisting or questioning me, I lashed out. I made your lives miserable because it made me feel important. I am deeply ashamed of the person I became. I am working on myself here, trying to understand why I acted the way I did. I hope that someday I can be a better person. I know I destroyed my marriage, my reputation, and my freedom. That is what I deserve. I just wanted you to know that I am sorry, truly sorry for what I put you through. Sincerely, Brenda." I read the letter twice and then filed it away in a drawer. I did not write back. I believed she was sorry, or at least I believed she was sorry she got caught and had to face consequences. Whether she had actually changed or learned anything, I could not say. That was for her to work out. The restitution money came through in September. Everyone who had been stolen from received checks for the full value of what had been taken, plus their share of the punitive damages. I got about $450 total. It was not life-changing money, but it was satisfying in principle. Justice had been served. Winter came around again, and this time I was prepared. I bought my ice melt early and kept it locked in my shed with a new heavy-duty padlock. The first ice storm hit in December, and I went out and properly salted my steps and walkway. No drama, no theft, just routine winter maintenance like it should be. I stood on my front porch one morning, drinking my coffee and watching the neighborhood wake up. Across the street, Sandra was scraping ice off her windshield. Jerry was shoveling his walk. A new family had moved into Brenda's old townhouse, a young couple with a toddler. They seemed nice. The kid loved to wave at everyone who walked by. Tom came walking past on his morning jog and stopped to chat. "How are you doing, Vincent? Staying warm? Doing good. Plenty of ice melt this year," he laughed. "Thank goodness. I still cannot believe everything that happened last year. It was definitely memorable." "Hey, speaking of which, we are having HOA elections next month. Any interest in running for a board position? We could use someone level-headed who actually cares about the community." I considered it for a moment. "You know what? Maybe, let me think about it." "Great. Let me know." "We need good people involved, people who remember what this is supposed to be about." As Tom jogged off, I thought about his offer. A year ago, I would have said no way. After everything with Brenda, the last thing I wanted was to be involved in HOA politics, but things were different now. The community was different. We had been through something together, and it had brought us closer instead of tearing us apart. Maybe that was the lesson in all of this. A bad leader can make everyone's life miserable, but a community working together can overcome even the worst situations. We had exposed corruption, held someone accountable, and rebuilt something better than what we had before. I went back inside to get ready for work, feeling more optimistic than I had in a long time. The ice melt saga was over, Brenda was serving her time, and Pleasant Ridge was actually starting to live up to its name. Sometimes justice takes time, and sometimes it involves security cameras and stolen ice melt, but it does eventually come around. The following spring, I did end up running for the HOA board, and I won. My first motion as a board member was to install security cameras in all the common areas, funded by the HOA. No one objected. We had all learned that transparency and security were important for keeping everyone honest. I also pushed for regular financial audits by an outside firm, conducted quarterly instead of annually. The board approved it unanimously. We were not going to let another Brenda situation happen on our watch. One afternoon in May, I was out front planting some flowers in the small garden bed by my door when I saw a car slow down in front of Brenda's old place. It was a gray sedan, and after a moment it pulled over. A woman got out. It took me a second to recognize her. It was Brenda, but a very different version of her. She had gained weight, her hair was plain brown without the highlights, and she was wearing simple jeans and a sweatshirt. She looked tired. I stood up slowly, not sure what to do. She saw me and froze for a moment, then raised her hand in an awkward wave. I nodded back but did not approach. She stood there for a few minutes, just looking at her old townhouse, and then got back in her car and drove away. Jerry had come out of his house and was standing next to me. "Was that Brenda?" "Yeah, I guess she got out on parole." "Huh, I heard she moved to Cleveland to live with her sister, starting fresh somewhere no one knows her. Probably for the best." We stood there in silence for a moment, watching the gray sedan disappear around the corner. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger at what she had done, pity for what she had become, and relief that this chapter of Pleasant Ridge history was truly closed. "You planting petunias?" Jerry asked, breaking the tension. "Marigolds, actually." "Nice." "Hey, we are grilling out tonight if you want to come by. Just a few neighbors, nothing fancy." "Yeah, that sounds good. I will bring some beer." That evening, I sat in Jerry's backyard with Sandra, Tom, Dorothy, and a few other neighbors. We grilled chicken, told stories, and laughed about nothing in particular. No one mentioned Brenda or the events of last winter. We had moved past it. We were building something new, something better. As the sun set and the fireflies started to come out, I realized I was genuinely happy. This place, this community, had become home. Not because of the HOA rules or the property values, but because of the people. We had been tested and we had come through it together. The ice melt incident, as we had started calling it, had become a cautionary tale in Columbus HOA circles. I had been contacted by a local news station for an interview, which I declined. But apparently several HOA management companies had used our story as an example of why oversight and transparency were important. One property management blog had written an article titled, "How One Ohio HOA Uncovered Systemic Fraud Through Community Cooperation." We were famous in the most mundane way possible, but inside Pleasant Ridge, life had genuinely improved. Tom's relaxed leadership style had created an atmosphere where people actually wanted to participate instead of just trying to avoid violations. Attendance at HOA meetings had tripled. People volunteered for committees. The neighborhood looked better because people cared about it, not because they feared fines. I continued serving on the board for 2 years. In that time, we updated the bylaws, created a reserve fund with transparent management, and established a community garden that everyone could use. We even started a neighborhood watch program, though it was more about looking out for each other than catching criminals. The ice melt I had bought that second winter lasted me 3 years. Every time I saw those bags in my shed, I remembered the absurdity of how a community leader had fallen, literally and figuratively, because of her own greed and poor judgment. It reminded me to stay humble, to follow the rules I expected others to follow, and to always use the ice melt on my own steps first. Dorothy, the elderly woman who had fallen and injured herself, became something of a neighborhood grandmother. She would bake cookies for the new families who moved in and always had stories about the old days. She told me once that the whole incident with Brenda had taught her that you can never really know what is going on in someone else's life. She seemed to have it all together, Dorothy said. The nice house, the fancy car, the perfect hair. But inside, she was falling apart. People do desperate things when they feel like they are losing control. I thought about that a lot. Brenda had not started out as a villain. She had probably genuinely wanted to make the neighborhood better when she first became HOA president. But somewhere along the way, the power had corrupted her, and she had lost sight of what was important. It was a cautionary tale about leadership and ego. The young couple who bought Brenda's old townhouse, Michael and Lauren, became good friends with Jerry and me. They had no idea about the history of the place when they bought it, and we decided not to tell them. It did not seem fair to burden them with that baggage. They were good neighbors, quiet and friendly, and their kid was adorable. One winter evening, about 3 years after the whole incident, Michael came over with a problem. "Hey Vincent, I hope you do not mind me asking, but do you have any ice melt I could borrow? I totally forgot to buy any and we are supposed to get that storm tonight." I smiled and said, "Sure, come around back, I have got plenty." As I handed him a bag from my shed, he said, "Thanks man, I will replace this next week." No rush. That is what neighbors do. After he left, I stood in my shed for a moment, looking at the remaining bags of ice melt. The irony was not lost on me. This was exactly what Brenda should have done. Just asked, just been a decent neighbor. Instead, her pride and her greed had destroyed her life. But standing there in that cold shed, I felt grateful. Grateful that I lived in a community where people looked out for each other now. Grateful that we had overcome something difficult and come out stronger. Grateful that justice had been served, even if it had come in the most unusual way possible. I locked up the shed and walked back to my house. Through the windows, I could see my living room, warm and inviting. I had recently started dating someone, Rachel Lopez, a teacher I had met at a community event. She was kind, smart, and had no patience for HOA drama, which I found incredibly refreshing. She was coming over for dinner later, and I needed to start cooking. As I prepared dinner, I thought about how much my life had changed since that January morning when I had discovered my ice melt missing. That single act of theft had set off a chain of events that had exposed corruption, brought a community together, and ultimately led to positive change. It was funny how life worked sometimes. Rachel arrived right as the snow started to fall. She came in shaking snowflakes from her hair, carrying a bottle of wine and laughing about how she had almost slipped on her steps. "Did you put down ice melt?" I asked, already knowing I had a spare bag if she needed it. "Yes, finally. I kept forgetting to buy it, but I grabbed some last week." "Good, I have got plenty if you ever need more." She gave me a quizzical look. "You seem very passionate about ice melt. You have no idea." "I will tell you the story over dinner." And I did. I told her everything. About Brenda, the theft, the fall, the trial, the restitution, all of it. Rachel listened with wide eyes, occasionally interrupting with questions or exclamations of disbelief. "That is absolutely insane," she said when I finished. "Your HOA president stole ice melt and then fell on her own icy steps while holding the stolen bag. Yep, you cannot make this stuff up. That is like instant karma in real life. Pretty much." The whole thing changed our neighborhood, though. For the better, honestly. Sometimes you need something bad to happen to shake things up and make people pay attention. Rachel raised her wine glass. "To ice melt and the lessons it teaches." I clinked my glass against hers, laughing. "To ice melt." Later that night, after Rachel had gone home and I was getting ready for bed, I looked out my window at the snow-covered neighborhood. Every house had their lights on, warm glows against the white landscape. Sidewalks were properly salted. Steps were clear. Everything was peaceful and safe. Tomorrow I would wake up, shovel my walk, salt my steps, and go to work. I would wave to Jerry, check in on Dorothy, maybe grab coffee with Tom before the next board meeting. Normal, boring, wonderful life in Pleasant Ridge. The ice melt saga was over, but its impact continued. We were a stronger community because of it. We had learned to communicate, to watch out for each other, to hold our leaders accountable. We had learned that transparency matters, that rules should serve the community rather than the ego of whoever is in charge. And on a personal level, I had learned that standing up for what is right, even over something as mundane as stolen ice melt, matters. I could have let it go. I could have just bought new ice melt and eaten the cost. But by pursuing it, by refusing to accept theft and corruption, I had helped expose something much bigger. Sometimes the smallest acts of injustice reveal the largest problems. Sometimes a stolen bag of ice melt is not just about the ice melt. It is about respect, boundaries, and the social contract we all agree to when we choose to live in a community together. Brenda had broken that contract in multiple ways, and she had paid the price. The legal system had worked, slowly but surely. Justice had been served. And Pleasant Ridge had become a genuinely pleasant place to live. As I finally drifted off to sleep that night, my last thought was about those security cameras I had installed. They had captured the truth when someone tried to hide it. They had provided the evidence needed to hold a corrupt leader accountable. They had changed everything. I made a mental note to check the batteries tomorrow. Because in a world where people sometimes steal ice melt in the middle of the night, it pays to keep your eyes open and your cameras charged. But more importantly, it pays to be part of a community that gives a damn, that stands together when things go wrong, and that builds something better from the ashes of betrayal and theft. Pleasant Ridge had been tested by an ice storm and a corrupt leader. We had emerged stronger, wiser, and more united. And when next winter came, we would all have plenty of ice melt, bought honestly and shared freely, just like neighbors should.